If you have ever been to Manitoba, perhaps the first thing that you would notice would be or maybe the second thing you would notice after the cold, especially when you come at this time of the year, would be the diversity of our population. And immigration, that's because immigration has been continuously driving our population growth. And in Manitoba, when you talk about immigration, you're just practically talking about the MPNP, where 90% of our economic immigrants, like me, arrive to Manitoba through the MPNP. And so, well, it's actually surprising to me when I was preparing this presentation that MPNP started as a rural immigration program. When the community of Winkler, it's about 2.5 hours away from Winnipeg, approached the province and asked for help in recruiting employees for some of their industries there. And in recent years, we have seen more and more people going to rural destinations. In fact, last year, almost a third of our nominees were destined to communities outside of Winnipeg. We actually don't have a separate stream on rural immigration. Our current approach is just to have a rural lens into our current pathways. So whenever a municipality or a community partner approaches us for help, then we just look at our pathways and streams for business investors, for skilled workers, for international students. So as Lara said, there's flexibility and scalability on this because now we are able to scale up or scale down based on the partner's needs. But as a strategy, we usually have 4 core components. And the first one is that support to employers and communities. We have a small team of, we call them the employer engagement unit. We have business immigration officers for entrepreneurs, and we also have community coordinators to take care of our municipalities. The second is, again, that we also found value to an approach that, as I've mentioned, we are able to scale up or scale down. We can have a broad community program like the one that we have in Morden, or similar to what our MIP is doing in Brandon and Altona. But we can also just work with individual rural employers or even with economic development offices in looking at component 3, which is attracting rural investments in the municipality. And the fourth component is settlement support. There was actually a study done by Brandon University in 2013 that identified the factors that help provincial nominees integrate better in the community. And the first was employment opportunities. So usually people go to the rural areas because of the jobs, right? But the second factor was access to services, so housing, health, education. The third is having that organized and consultative manner of providing the settlement support, which makes a welcoming community. And I want to make a note on exploratory visits because we were able to relate this to retention outcomes and settlement services. When you apply to a community program, for example, like Morden, you are required to do a 1-week exploratory visit. So at your own expense, you go to Morden, talk to potential employers, look around neighborhoods, research about housing prices, which is a thing in most culture, or even look for shops that would sell rice or spice, which is also big in many cultures. So in short, in 1 week, the applicant would be able to have a feel of what it is like to live in that community. So the value of that is the applicant then can have an informed decision if the community is a good fit for them. For the community, it actually gives them a higher retention rate, just like what we learned from Morden. They say that because the applicant already invested in the community in terms of time, effort, and money, so they already know what they're going into. So the tendency is when they arrive, they have made a decision to start a new life and make it work. And then because the applicant has made the networks or contacts already during the visit, so they already know where to go and what to do. So the tendency again is they need less hand-holding in terms of where to go, which agencies to do, or which agencies to go to, because they already have an idea of what to expect. And for us at the MPNP, it's one of our effective quality assurance tools. Applicants who usually come on exploratory visits have the higher approval rates. So anyway, so all of these things come into play when we begin our partnership with a community, and it can start with either the council or an economic development office or the Chamber of Commerce asking us on how we can work with them, work within the MPNP pathways to address their immigration needs. Ideally, prior to contacting the MPNP, they have done some planning and analysis on labor market gaps, preferred or what their preferred business investments are, probably have an idea of their the profile of the candidates that they want, and ideally, they should have at least an immigration committee who would oversee the process and have a contact person to coordinate with the MPNP. And the most important thing is they have already explored the receptiveness of the community to immigration. So candidates can connect with the community through exploratory visit, or if you're an entrepreneur, then you can apply to start up a business or even buy a farm, or if you are able to secure a formal job offer from a rural employer. So all these elements can be part of a community program, but not all communities would have that need or capacity to have those elements in the program. So that's why, as I've said, that scale down, scale up, depending on their needs and capacity, so we can work with individual employers. And we are getting more and more requests from rural employers about this. So now we're thinking of how we can do more, reaching out, be able to reach them through online webinars, or again, so those other business investment pathways, we can also work through them. Francophone immigration is also a priority, and we do this through a very strong partnership with the Center for Economic Development in Manitoba. So they are the ones who provide support to our bilingual communities in the rural areas. So settlement. So settlement, we cannot overemphasize the role of coordination with settlement service partners in making our municipal partnerships work. There are about 13 settlement service providers outside of Winnipeg, and when more and more people went to the rural areas, the province worked so that there would be comparable services available in the rural areas. And so, but the continuing challenge is the rapidly increasing number of arrivals settling in an increasing number of centers over a wide geographic area. So that's a continuing challenge for us. So the tendency is, service delivery is a bit difficult and more costly. So whenever possible, settlement services are housed with mainstream organizations like EDO, Chambers of Commerce, or EAL centers. The idea is the more settlement service providers become embedded as a part of the local community, the more successful they are, which in turn can lead to improved retention for newcomers, which, as you know, is often a challenge. So in many cases, the settlement centers act as a one-stop shop where newcomers can register for their health card, get their SIN, know about job employment or job opportunities, ask about daycare services, or even just a place to meet up with other ethnocultural associations. So the legacy of this coordination is what ensured settlement services are available across the province, even now that IRCC directly funds settlement services. So here are some of the examples of our more successful partnerships over the years. Morden, which is a town close to the US border, about 2.5 hours away, remained to be our model partnership. And I think I can name two things that got it going for them. The first is they adopted a managed growth approach. So they just started small, and then they gradually increased intake as they developed the capacity. Currently, their average is about 50 to 60 nominees a year. And through this approach, and they also target just, I think, 4 or 5 occupational groups that they project to meet the demand for their manufacturing industries. So very focused. So through this, they were able to plan better their public investments, and the community is not overly stretched. The second thing is it truly is a community program. So it's not the program of one person or one organization. It's really a program of more than. So, and you can see this based on the large base of volunteers that they have in Morden. So they have volunteers for airport pickups, for driving people to doctor's appointments, or renting out extra basements or extra rooms for newcomers or those on exploratory visits, or sometimes even taking care of pets of newcomers, because sometimes the apartments don't accept pets, so people are willing to take them. So, but we also learned a lot from the other communities where the immigration growth was driven by, say, single large employers. And I can name High Life here in Nipawah. So High Life extended their English language courses to spouses and near adult children. And I think that also goes with Meridian in Winkler. And if I'm not mistaken, the Friesen, it's a printing company in Altona. They used to have like a savings program for employees who wanted to set aside a part of their salary for future down payments in-house. And for many, that's a thing, you know, having their own house with a large yard and 2-car garage. So that's important for them, and it's a motivation for them to stay with the employer and in the community. So all of our rural employers, they have some level of settlement supports for their workers and families. Some even have pre-departure orientations, so before the worker leaves from their country, they get oriented about what to expect, including, of course, our notorious winter. So, so we continue to advance these partnerships, and a few months ago, we reached out to 14 of the 16 municipalities who applied to the RNIP, but were unsuccessful. And when we were looking at the profile of these municipalities, we found out some uniqueness on this cohort that we were not able to find in the other municipalities that we have worked so far. First is they are farther away from Winnipeg. So Winkler, Morden, Steinbach, Altona, they are an easy 2.5-hour commute from Winnipeg. And for some, it's becoming less and less of an issue. We have more people now, say, living in Steinbach and working in Winnipeg. But that will not be the case for, say, Churchill. It's a town of 900 persons by the Hudson Bay. You can reach it by an overnight train or a very expensive plane ride. The next town is Gilam, 10 hours away, also by train. The employment is very seasonal. The economy is based on tourism, which peaks during the polar bear season, which is now until November, or during the summer when the ports is operating, right? So obviously, we cannot compel candidates to do an exploratory visit there, right? So we may have to have a different approach for communities like Churchill. The second is the economy is quite small and homogeneous. We are talking now with Pinawa. Pinawa is a district of 500 persons, but it's very close to Winnipeg, and they are trying to market the community as a tourism town and as a retirement community. So, but there are business incubators in the area, and it's quite close to Winnipeg. So we may have some opportunities to harness some of those potential. The third uniqueness of this RNIP group is, or perhaps because they are small and the economy is homogeneous, most of them banded together and formed clusters of partnerships, like those farming communities in the west of Manitoba or in parklands. Well, Manitoba is divided into 8 economic regions, so this setup makes sense, but we may have to take a different approach when we start a partnership with them. One of them is probably a trusted third-party partner. Recently, there's a recruitment mission we had in Argentina, and for several tech companies in Winnipeg recruiting IT specialists. And we had a third party then, the Economic Development of Winnipeg. So EDW vetted the employers, the job offers. They assisted the employers do the marketing, advertising, screening, even making the contacts to Argentina. And we only came in for the immigration support. So that means orienting them about work visa issues, spousal permits, PNP process, IRCC process. And that worked a bit quite well for us, and it's something that we're thinking of that we may be able to replicate when we deal with rural employers in a wide geographic area. So that's something that we're keeping in mind. So we can probably partner with EDOs or the Chambers of Commerce or even Community Futures, which have a very strong regional presence. So this is my last slide. We are trying to make our engagement with municipalities more standardized. So we came up with this rural immigration toolkit. And we also did that because one of the things that we learned is it is important to develop the planning capacity of the communities. So because it sets realistic expectations on what they can achieve, what capacities or support that should be in place, or what it entails to have a welcoming community. So that is very important. And so community planners or whoever is leading the immigration process in the community can refer to this guide for, say, how to benefit from immigration or how to conduct a needs assessment or how to formulate an immigration plan. It's available in our website, and they can use this as a self-help guide so that they can start building this planning capacity.
Great.
Thank you.